Hey guys, and welcome back to Gorge River. Now I really appreciate everyone's questions and comments from my previous video where I announced I was going back to Gorge River. Now I had one question from Box of Fluffy Ducks, awesome YouTube name by the way, and it was, what birds do we have at Gorge River and what are we doing about the birds here? Are we trapping predators and that sort of thing? So I'm going to go and ask Mum to explain that a lot more and just talk about what birds we have at Gorge River and what we're doing about protecting them. This is my home at Gorge River.
In the garden we see fantails and tomtits. If you're gardening out there, quite often the tomtit will come down and take worms that you dig up. Fantails fly around you to get the sandflies that are coming to you. They'll be flying around you in the bush. Up on the hill we've seen lots of tui lately, and there's always bellbirds singing in the bush. We had a couple of kia come for a visit a couple of months ago, but luckily they didn't stay around too long. They're a bit too adventurous and they tend to chew things up and damage things and get a bit too excited. But kaka, who look very similar, they're a bit more calm and they live up at the top of the hill. And we'll see them flying from one side to the other across the river in the evenings. The spotted shags nesting out on the island at the moment, and later in the summer though, the young ones will probably come in and hang around in the river for a few months until they get ready to move on. Plenty of seabirds everywhere. Further down the beach there's Fiordland penguins, a whole colony of them, about 400 nests in the first couple of miles. They nest right up in the forest. There's usually plenty of pigeons flying around. We see the odd fern bird up at the top of the hill. You can find riflemen. Occasionally you see brown creepers. Up the river sometimes there's blue duck. Roberts were a breeding pair of them last year for the first time in 30 years. The worst problem for the birds is the introduced mammalian predators, particularly stoats and also rats. Even possums have been seen to take birds' eggs and sometimes adult birds. So I run stoat traps, which also catch rats at times, particularly through the summer. Sometimes in the summer, they're quite hard to catch, but sometimes in the summer you'll catch up to 30 stoats. We're expecting a really bad summer this year on the back of the rat plague that's been through most of New Zealand this year as a result of the huge seed masting year last year. We've never had kiwi around here, but just lately the Department of Conservation has discovered a previously unknown colony of kiwi living up this river in a habitat that nobody even realised they were in before. We always have a pair of prairie ducks living on our airstrip, and we see them lay eggs and appear often in the summertime with maybe 9 ducklings, and the next day there'll be 8 and then 7, 6, 5, and if you're lucky they manage to raise one by the end of the season, only occasionally. They will live here for 15 years or more, the same pair, until maybe they die or the next pair pushes them off. There was one year when 2 chicks were surviving and then the mother was taken, probably by a stoat, and the father actually raised them for another month on his own until they too were taken out by a stoat. They mate for life, so he didn't breed again, but he hung around for a couple more years even though another pair had moved in. So long as he wasn't actually a pair, they seemed to tolerate him quite well. There's a pair of oyster catchers that lives around here, and it's fun watching them when they're nesting. They don't like to be disturbed, they'll jump off their nest all the time, but if you are in the bush and they can't see you, maybe with a telescope you can watch them. So we've seen them hatching, and again they usually get taken out fairly quickly by stoats, but sometimes we see them survive. The chicks tend to hang around for quite a long time after they've fledged, maybe 3 or 4 more months, sort of being fed or learning to feed themselves. They're really funny when they're little and the parents really only feed at low tide. So we're watching them when they're tiny and they're obviously hungry and they can't wait for 6 hours for the tide to go out. One year we were actually feeding them on bits of possum meat. We'd just throw them and one of the adults would come up and pick them up and then take them off and feed them to the chicks. We've had a couple of pet seagulls too that every now and then they'll just drop in and hang around for a few days, and you could feed those. The big seagulls can swallow a whole possum leg with the fur on, with the claws on. They'll still come back for more, but they can't fit any more in because when they open their beaks, the leg falls out. So they kind of wobble off over the flaxes and down to the river, and they just sit there for a while and digest for a bit, and then they can spit it back up and get rid of the bones.
So hopefully that answered your question, and Box of Fluffy Ducks, thank you once again for asking. And just to finish the question, we don't actually have any involvement in the 2050 Predator Free New Zealand. However, we are doing our part in trapping possums, stoats and rats here. So in some ways, yes, we do have a small involvement with that. So thank you very much for your question. And if anyone else has got some other questions, please ask, and next time I'm at home at Gorge River, I will do my best to answer them. And that's all for today. So until our next video, thanks for watching, and good night, good day and good morning.